Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Wednesday afternoon at MadFest. So you know who I am, I'm Helen, and I'm going to be talking to you for the next 15 minutes about my lessons in retail media. But before you think, not another retail media presentation at an industry event, I'm going to try and do it in a slightly different way. And the reason why I'm going to do it in a different way is because, as they say in the industry, I am not from agency. In fact, I spent the first 20 years of my career at Procter & Gamble, and I was in the brand building function, doing a myriad of different assignments throughout that time. Those quick synopsis is I basically ran 17 different brands across 11 different markets in the health and beauty space. But so what? What does that mean? Well, that means that I think, it means I feel, and it means I identify as a brand builder. So the way I look at retail media, even today as the managing director of Capture, I look at it very much through a brandy lens. Now, I'm going to start with a confession. This is what I thought a few years ago when I was a brand director. I thought that retail media was just for shopper and trade teams. I thought that it was just a conversion tool and it was blinking hard to measure. And if I'm being really honest, when I was a brand builder, I thought it was a little bit dull. And to be honest, it wasn't just dull, it was a real pain for me. It was a pain because every year when I was setting my budgets as a brand, someone senior in sales would come to me and say, well, Helen, you need to chuck out X% of cash for X retailer because we've made X commercial agreement. And I would have no idea of how that money was being spent, and I'd have no idea if it was even driving returns for me. Now, things did definitely get better in the industry. So I started to have more strategic conversations with retailers on where that money could be spent. More touch points got developed. I even started to get ROI reports to know how it was performing. But it still wasn't the be all and end all, and I still didn't really focus on much as a brand builder. However, retail media in the last 2 to 3 years has completely changed the game. And when I say completely changed the game, I mean it's changed every single facet of the advertising ecosystem in its wake, which is why there is so much conversation and action about it in the industry. So what has driven this change? You've probably seen this a million times. I'm not going to dwell too much on the story, but what I always do say is that retail media always had brilliant foundations. It was so hard as a brand to unlock those foundations. But the innovation in ad and march tech really allowed brands to really access that gold mine of retailer first-party data. Retailers were sat years on this fabulous data, both in scale and in breadth of consumer insight, but I couldn't get my hands on it. Now that is very different, and brands can access that data in a variety of ways to drive their business for them. It also led to true omni-channel targeted media. The inventory that has become available not only is greater within retailers, it's so much more sophisticated, but also within the off-site world as well. And every single week you see a new partnership between a retailer and between a media owner where they're taking their data and putting it in that off-site ecosystem. The holy grail of closed loop measurement. Not only is it just about now, did they maybe buy? You can actually know if it delivered real purchase. I can't believe that I ran brands, sometimes for 10 years, on what may have happened, not what actually really happened. And then, of course, you've got real-time optimization. I remember thinking it was great when I got an ROI report 3 months after a campaign. That was winning, by the way. Now I know exactly when I do a campaign, I know actually how is that performing every 24 hours when the loyalty data gets uploaded. And all of that leads to brand growth. So, what does it mean? Why should you care as a brand person? Well, actually, it means that if you're still thinking about retail media in that old world, as I used to think about it, you're already behind the game because your competitors are thinking about it like this. They're looking at how do they use retail media to supercharge their brand growth overall. And that would be quite a scary thing if I said that to myself. So I'm going to write back to Dear Brand Me. Dear Brand Me, who was running those health and beauty brands however many years ago at Procter & Gamble, you need to get your head in the game on retail media. And I'm going to give you 3 big lessons on how you can do that and win. First one, you need to build your own home. Every single brand I have spoken to, the situation is the same. That's irrespective of size, irrespective of category. The challenge that many people have is there is not an obvious place where retail media can sit. So if you think about retail media, it's so broad, it spans so many multiple teams in a client, in a brand supplier. So of course, you've got the shopper team, you've got the sales team. Increasingly, you've had the e-com team as it expanded onto on-site and digital. You've got the media team as it's gone into the off-site space. But you've also got the brand team as it's tipped into brand building. So where on earth does that sit within retail, within retail media? How do you structure your organization to do that? The first thing everybody has to do is break down silos. And I've seen this done in a myriad of different ways. I've seen it done very much from people who's like, let's just get people in the right room to have a conversation and align an agenda. I've seen it very much in a world where people have said, do you know what? We're going to create a project scheme or a project brief, and we're going to have certain people work on that project jointly together to deliver what our strategy should be. I've seen it in some actual suppliers where they've gone, do you know what? We're going to restructure our total organization. We're going to restructure our reporting lines because we believe in this so much. We're going to have dedicated teams built up with that multifaceted expertise to go and deliver our strategy and plans. Next thing you need to do is define your strategy. It is not rocket science. I always think as a brand builder, we can make marketing theory really complicated. It's not. It's really simple. There is not one size fits all. But what you need to do is really understand your brand and your business objectives, and your retail media strategy will fall out of that. For example, if you are a high awareness brand with high penetration in a category and something that's bought very frequently, you probably need a different strategy than if you're a brand with relatively low penetration, maybe a highly involved brand that has a very long purchase frequency. So if I take some examples of my old days, if you are running Flash or Fairy Liquid, you probably need a very different product or a different strategy than if you're running, for example, Oral-B powered toothbrushes. So it's not a one size fits all, and you need to decide what's going to work for your brand. Thirdly, you need to align budgets to the strategy. It is amazing when you talk to brands and you say, how much are you spending on retail media? And they lift the lid, because it's all coming from different pots in some cases. Of course, you've got your JBP trade spend, but then there's often an e-commerce budget, there's often a brand building budget, there's often a separate media budget for test and learn and innovation. It's really important you're clear and you've got that single line of visibility of what are you spending in the ecosystem, and make sure that you're clear on what that is. It comes from those different pots, but it's at those aligned goals. It's not being cut across different parts of the business. And I always say, I've been in many meetings where people have been arguing which should sit in which budget and pot. And as I always used to say, the consumer ever sees the execution, they never see which budget pot it came from. So let's all get over ourselves, decide the right budget, and go and execute brilliantly. And the last one is to build capability. Retail media is still relatively new, and that means nobody, myself included, grew up in retail media. Everybody comes from different parts of the industry, whether you were in a media owner, whether you worked in an advertising agency, whether you were focused on .com and e-commerce, whether you come from a trade team, whether you come from brand building, it's completely different. But what's really important is that you surround yourselves and to get that full capability you need to win in retail media. And that can be done by, of course, upskilling yourself. It can be done by bringing people in-house who are experts within your team in those different areas. But it can also be done by enlisting specialist help as well. And the three big areas I think you really need to have the capability in to do this brilliantly is, firstly, you need to understand the commerce landscape and the nuance of working with retailers. It can be the best thing in the world if you've got this beautiful plan that you want to go and execute. But if it's not aligned to the category vision or the role that your brand plays within that category for a retailer, it's probably not going to do the job that you want it to do. Nor, let's be honest, let's talk the elephant in the room. What happens if you lose out on a range review? What are you going to do then? Would that change your plan? So you've got to understand that nuance of relationship. Secondly, you need to be able to understand media and talk about it fluently. The advertising world of retail media has become so much more sophisticated than just putting aisle things in store. You need to really understand that landscape of what does brilliant planning look like? What does brilliant activation optimization look like? Or you need experts who are able to do it. And lastly, you need to understand about innovation and the advancement of March and ad tech. And the reason you need to do that is because every single week there is a new product coming out in market in this space. And you need to have someone who can differentiate what are the shiny toys and what are the things that can really make a difference for you. But overall, you need to lead the change. Because there is no home where this sits, there's no obvious leader for someone who can do this. And the brands who are winning are someone's put their hand up and said, I think we need to find a way of doing this brilliantly. We need to find a way to harness it to supercharge our growth. I'm going to lead what that looks like. So I would say to myself, Helen, step out of your comfort zone and lead the change and define how you're going to use retail media to drive your brand growth. Next lesson, you've probably heard this to death, not just today, but previously in the industry, that it's not just about conversion. It's that full funnel opportunity across all of the vectors that you see here. There are some times when I'm working with the clients and I think I would have killed for the level of targeting you can do today with retail first party data when I was running brands, and the measurability, the real measurability that you've got of closed loop. So this is not new news. We've talked about it for a while. There's two things that are new news though. One is the amount of evidence we have in the industry that this is true. I don't know if you saw Dean's talk earlier, but it's not just talk, it's actually happening. The second one is that brands aren't just talking this, they are actually doing it. So I was at a brilliant, there was a panel session in Cannes I went to run by Nectar, and they had a whole dedicated session of well-known FMCG brands talking about how they are specifically using retail media to drive their brand build in this space. And it wasn't the shopper teams presenting it. So, loads of data. I've got one report to show you. This was a report that was done with Mesh and SMG last year. This was a huge study, okay, done across multiple retailers, multiple categories. 16,000 consumer experiences were analysed, and the data was pretty compelling. The impact on brand consideration, you can see, the impact on brand awareness at 3.6 times, but really interestingly, there were some categories which I didn't expect, where actually the increase on brand awareness was 5 to 6 times in certain categories in store. That is incredibly compelling. And we've always said in-store has incredible reach, right? Nobody can argue about the reach scale that you've got through all the in-store touch points. But what has changed is we understand now the role that it can play in also driving attention and creating that connection with consumers. But also what has changed is the quality of inventory that is now available in store. So again, gone are the days of buying an aisle thing that's cardboard. Now you can buy super sophisticated screens in which you can serve your ads programmatically. Again, as you're a brand, and if you have certain key cultural moments or certain seasonal moments, it is a huge enabler of you driving that awareness in the time that's really meaningful to your consumer. Go and look at other data. I would quote the Lumen Co-op data is also brilliant, as is the Lumen Tesco data. There is tons of data out there to really show the role that it can do. I'm going to pick one campaign that was out of this Mesh study. And the one campaign I'm going to pick is the Fenty Match the Nation for boots. And there's two reasons I picked this. First reason is the number one objective that Fenty had to deliver for the Boots Media Group was drive awareness that we have a foundation in boots. Nothing to do with uplift, nothing to do with conversion, just drive awareness that we are present in the foundation category. Secondly, they went about this in a completely different way. They looked at it as a retail media first versus a general media, and we'll siphon some budget off to the trade team and get them to run that. What that meant was they really spent time looking at the Advantage Card data, mining for the consumer insights, which actually helped develop their Match the Nation campaign. But critically, they studied the beauty enthusiasts. They really understand what messages work best for them, in what locations, how should we be talking with them? How do we build a plan that includes first-party data, geo-targeted data, broad reach? And they came up with, as you can see, an unmissable campaign that went across in-store, off-site, and on-site. And I could tell you all the stats behind it, and I won't, but you just need to look at the pictures. And the reason I say that is because that's all the consumer sees, right? The consumer doesn't see all the stats, but they see the pictures. And it looks very, very different from how retail media was done when I was running the beauty brands at P&G, for example. You can see the stats here also delivered. It drove industry coverage, industry award winning, the impressions, and again, the classic brand ROI. So they could genuinely measure what it delivered for purchase. It also increased their brand share within foundation, and critically, it drove the foundation category for boots as well. So, last lesson. Right, you've got your house in order, You've convinced me that it's not just conversion. Where do I go from now? Well, test and learn. And the reason you can test and learn is because you can make the most of measurement. You're not waiting 6 months or 3 months to see if it worked. You're waiting in some cases 24 hours, maybe let it run a bit longer, but you're waiting to see if you're really creating impact. And so the lesson I would say here is, don't think about, oh, I'm going to test for a campaign. Think about all those big hypotheses you've got as a brand and how you want to drive your business. And think how retail media can enable you to test those. So for example, what's the role of master brand in the retail media space? Pretty, pertinent question at the minute if you are one of the brands who fall into LHS. Or how do you use retail media in a world where maybe some of your touch points become out of scope or in scope from October, in some cases in January? So you can really use it to do different things. One of my favorites is, what is the multiplier effect of fully holistic out of home? What I mean by fully holistic out of home is, how do you really join up the ecosystem of the big formats that you've got from the traditional brand building sites, through the geolocated proximity sites, through to the in-store digital screens? What's the multiplier effect if you get them all really in sync and holistically working together? Because chances are they probably haven't been, because they've probably been planned with different agencies and on different plans from different budgets. There is a brilliant study by Tesco on this. I really, really encourage everybody to go and look at it. So get curious, get your hypothesis clear, and stay curious. And then the other thing is, take advantage of the measurement. So I thought it was a dream when I first got ROI data, and I could see on touch point specific, is this performing or not? Those are the crawl days, guys. So now the conversation has moved to incrementality. It's moved to reach and frequency as it's gone into more of the media space. But where it gets really, really interested is when you look at the more advanced analytics, things like acquisition, retention, re-engagement. So actually, you're not just thinking, how has my campaign performed in this short, say, promotional period? You're looking at, how has my campaign performed with consumers over a 6-month period, over a year period, and how valuable are those consumers to me over a 3-year period? That's really compelling for a brand like Gillette, where actually your whole business is about customer lifetime value. It's not just about what do you do in a 12-week campaign window. And then the holy grail where we're moving to as an industry is that one measurement solution. So as a brand, how can you look with one view of, what is this delivering as an ecosystem for both my brand metrics? How's it shifting awareness, top of mind awareness, aided awareness, equity, recall, as well as how is it delivering on my conversion metrics as well? So what would I write myself then? I would write myself a letter that said, dear brand me, what you used to think retail media was really isn't retail media. And actually, I'm going to steal a quote from James Chandler. I don't know if anybody got to see him yesterday, but he came out with a quote in his report last year, which said, all media will become retail media. That would make me listen up in the old days. So you've got to lead the charge by building your own home. You've got to break down those silos, define your strategy, sort out your budgets, and build your capability, and lead the charge. Lean into the full funnel opportunity. Your competitors are doing it already, Helen. So you are behind the game. So wake up and start to get and lean in and do it. And learn. Learn as much as you can. One of my favorite phrases that came out of Cannes was, it's not learning and failing, it's winning and succeeding. So win and succeed and make the most of the measurement capabilities of how you do it. And it's not easy. You've probably heard a lot of conversations today about, it is a little bit messy, right? We're still putting together some of the jigsaw pieces in industry. It's still complex. It's my job as one of the industry leaders to try and make that simpler for brands and try and make it simpler as well across the retail media networks. But the ones who are doing it are seeing the rewards, and the rewards are great. So best of luck. And that's everything from me. I will be there available for questions at the end if people have them. Thank you.